I'd like to convene the meeting of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District's special board meeting at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. Roll call, please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein?
Present.
Director Bloom?
Here.
Director Jones?
Here.
Director Crawley?
Present.
And Director Solano is absent.
Great, thank you. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And there are no reportable actions from closed session. So we'll move on to public comment number 1. And we do have a public comment from Miles. He's from Senator Josh Becker's office. Please, thank you for being here, Miles.
Here's one?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Miles Goodman. I am a caseworker and field representative for Senator Josh Becker. I cover Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, Stanford, and Los Altos Hills. I also work at Phil's, hence the get up. And I'm just here to reach out and say that we are grateful for the Fire Protection District's contribution of a fire engine to fight the wildfires in Maui. Demonstrates the importance of cross-state boundaries in terms of fighting wildfires, and we are very, very grateful that we were able to send a resource over there. So I have a certificate for everyone.
Do you want to, is it for the district? Or
It's for the district, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And
Okay.
we also have a card for you. Happy birthday.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Don't say it.
Could you
Secret didn't last very long.
I'm turning
Sure.
red.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Miles. Yeah, if you don't mind reading it, that'd be great. We can take the group picture.
Yeah, sure. So presented to the Menlo Park Fire Protection District, on recognition of the district's contribution of the surplus fire engine to the Maui Fire Department in wake of the fires that spread across the island. This act of kindness and commitment to public safety demonstrates solidarity among first responders, but also underscores the importance of cross-border collaboration in managing and preventing wildfires.
Thank you,
On this
Miles.
14th day of November.
Great.
Great.
One thing, Miles, next time bring some fuel, the fuel card.
Feels coffee. Next time, bring some coffee.
I'll do it.
Okay, great. So should we get a group picture?
Sure.
You want to
Up
just,
there?
we can go up there or right up here.
Where?
In front of the,
This direction we're gonna do it. Oh, I see him coming.
Mark.
Yeah.
Can we get in?
Yeah, somebody in uniform.
Yeah, someone's got it.
Perfect.
Yeah. I want to sit close.
You want to go
Just
back up to-
present it. Oh, sure.
Yes, over here.
Okay.
Yeah, secret.
I know.
Also, I can probably see something right here.
It's like you're here.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, cheese. One more. Cheese. 1, 2, 1.
One more.
Cheese. Very nice. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Miles. Thanks so much.
Of course.
Thanks, Miles.
Thank the senator for us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
absolutely.
send them it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna, I'll grab this one.
There you
Parking.
She was trying to keep it a secret, but you spilled it.
That was from his boss, probably. Thank you, Brian.
Miles, you won't hurt our feelings if you slide out.
Yeah,
I'll take a look.
okay. So do we have any public comments online? Okay, then I will close public comment and we'll go to item 1, which is the report of the fire chief, discussion and direction. Chief?
Thank you, Director Corrali, members of the board, and members of people that are attending here on audience and online. Thank you. I'm happy to give you a chief's report for November of 2023. Just a quick update on facilities, the Station 1 design. We had a kickoff meeting with the architect that we hired. It was just kind of to talk overall about how we're gonna set up our timeline for meetings. We're gonna start meeting probably once every other week, and we'll be interacting with the facilities committee also as we go through that process. Station 3, accessory building, not much to update the board on, except for we had one change order on that. That was, as we were pulling down the fence there, we realized that we had a shed right in the middle of the, probably the most usable area, so we are moving that shed. We had to get a permit to take it down and relocate it, but now while the ground's open and everything else, it's just a small time to do it. Recruitment and hiring update, we hired a risk reduction officer, and her name is Amandeep Bonwait. I probably mispronounced the last name, but I know the first name is correct. She is gonna be starting with us in the beginning of December. I think December 4th will be her official first day in person. So we're looking forward to introducing her to you. She's gonna be part of that, the new program under Chief Johnston, and looking forward to adding a new member to that team. Fire inspectors, we're still in the process. That's fire inspector 1, 2 positions. We do have, what's Dave's last name, Peroni? Dave Peroni has been stolen from us by Woodside Fire Protection District versus Woodside, but it's hard to keep good people down, so we will probably be hiring 2 fire inspector 1, 2s. We have a really robust list, which is really great to see, so that's good. Looking forward to hiring some new inspectors. The battalion chief list, like I had said, I think at last meeting has been finalized. Chief Stahl has been promoted permanently, and we have 1 or 2 more promotions off that list in the near term. One when Chief Calvert retires towards the end of the year, and then possibly another one if we are successful in some discussions with our 40-hour battalion chief. Firefighters are currently in backgrounds. The 7 primary candidates, all so far so good. They are going to be starting in the academy in January. Other updates, or other items to update on, just as I've been doing at every meeting, just an update on what's going on in our community engagement unit. Kind of a report out from Heather. We've had our first lease dose class, which is kind of a cert light for Spanish speakers. We have 2 lease dose instructors that volunteer with the district now. We had 8 participants, which was a really great start. And we're looking forward to holding 2 more lease dose trainings next year. So that's great. Continuing to have really good attendance at our the other classes we're offering. Red Cross Ready, we had 17, Advanced First Aid 6, Cert Refresher 8, Stop the Bleed 6. The remaining classes for 2023 are either at capacity or very near close to capacity. So that's really great. We're going to add an additional class just to meet that demand. And we are also working in partnership with Red Cross to add a winter storm prep component to the classes too, just especially in light of what we went through last January. The Heather's group attended this November ADAP meeting and did a presentation on Neighbors Helping Neighbors. The 2024 class schedule is now up and available on the district's website, so people can begin registering on there, which is great. And then another thing that we did, as we gave the board the battery chargers as kind of a resiliency effort with our employees, we've also made a purchase of, I think, 2,000 of them to actually help distribute. They've been handed out to at least a portion of them to the Hood Squad, to Repack, and MPC Ready right now. They've got district stickers on them with our website and stuff, and so their goal is to hand them out to people in the community to help with community resilience.
So are they gonna hand them out to the least those graduates to
I don't know.
think?
Probably, I mean, that will be one of those things that we're gonna start doing every time we train somebody,
Yeah.
just kind of one of these things as far as helping prepare our community for, something similar to what happened last year or what might happen in an earthquake. Also, I attended as part of the, community engagement unit, we had a CERT meeting in this room on October 26th. I think that was a Thursday evening, really well attended, in person and online. Heather was rolling out some new policies that we've been adopting for the CERT program. Just a lot of good discussion in there. Heather's very good about keeping the meetings to an hour, but it was, we really had great participation. Just a quick update on the Maui fire engine donation. I'm sure Director Crowley will probably also share some experiences in her president's report, but the donation really went without a hitch, except for a flat tire on my rental car when I was supposed to be heading to the port to pick up the engine. Thank goodness for Uber. My anxiety was high with all the things that could potentially go wrong, whether the engine was actually gonna be there when I showed up in the port, whether it would start. And it did all those things. I took it over there to the fire station on, Thursday morning? Right,
Thursday.
Thursday morning so that they could clean it up. When I arrived, it was really wonderful just to see all the firefighters came out. They wanted to look at the red and white fire truck. Their fire engines are all yellow from top to bottom. And they were mesmerized by the bell and some of the tools that were on there. And it was, they washed it, cleaned it, and then we all came back that afternoon for a really wonderful, meaningful ceremony. It was interesting in having the conversations with them there, how thin their resources are and how truly needed and useful that fire engine is gonna be for them. And again, it was really so apropos, and I know we have a ratification that's in our consent agenda that, switch out engine 77 with engine 1. It was almost almost too perfect because Maui Fire Department lost their engine 1 and we replaced it with our engine 1, and it was it was about as perfect as could be. Really nice ceremony. They had a naming ceremony. They name all of their fire engines. They're usually after geographical areas, and they really had a lot of conversations about what they should name our engine, and they named it Pilina. And Pilina. P-I-L-A-N-A. And Pilina means.
P-I-L-I-N-A.
That's it, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
But yes, P-I-L-I-N-A, yes.
Yeah.
The meaning of Pilina is connection and community and relationship, and it was, the reason for that was almost obvious, right? The relationship and the bond that's been formed between Maui and a number of fire departments on the mainland, and now especially Menlo Park Fire District. It was just a really sweet, moving ceremony. So anyway, it was a good day, and as I indicated, they are really incredibly thin on resources. They're pretty, they're not funded incredibly well. I think they'll probably have some more funding now that we've seen the devastation that has occurred there, but it was one of those things that the day of the Lahaina fire, they actually had 5 other fires going at the same time. And 12 hours before the Lahaina fire, they actually had the worst fire in the history of the Hawaiian Islands had occurred that we didn't even hear about. They lost 16 homes, and it was quickly overshadowed by the Lahaina fire. So it was a really challenging environment for them. They didn't have enough resources to even staff up with additional personnel. Now this would be helpful. Station 4 open house, the next item. So we were gonna have an open house, a ribbon cutting in the middle of the week after we had the Halloween haunted house at Station 4. There was an overwhelming demand and requests for us to have an open house. So what we're planning on doing is shifting the ribbon cutting and hosting an open house all at once on Sunday, November 17th from 10 to 12. So-
December.
Did I say September?
November.
Oh, November. Sorry, yes, December 17th, Sunday, December 17th. I'll send an email out to the board this week, along with the flyer, so you can share it with anybody that's interested in coming. Plan is we'll give station tours,
What time did you say?
10 to 12. And the ribbon cutting is gonna be at 10:15. So it'd be great if all of our board members could attend and help us officially cut the ribbon for the station opening at Station 4, and then we'll invite the public in and give them tours. So that will be great. The next day, on Monday, the 18th, we're gonna have our annual holiday luncheon at the Four Seasons. I'll make sure I send some information out to you also, so you can get the timing right on that.
So that's no longer the 20th?
It should be on the Monday.
Okay, so that's the 18th.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll double check. I'll look at Michelle. Thumbs
Yes.
up, Monday the
Okay,
18th.
Monday,
Thank
the
you.
18th.
okay.
Please
Yeah.
RSVP.
What time is it again? 12 o'clock?
11, right?
We'll send out a flyer and get you all that information, and if you could RSVP at that time, that'd be great.
Thank you, Michelle.
Perfect. I know at our last meeting, this is just a quick report, we had some direction to do some staff reports on two issues, one with LAFCO and one with jurisdictional issues on water. So just wanted to let you know that we're working on those. I would imagine, I'm hoping January-ish that we can report out to the board with some, at least some information and some updates. We had our annual bid night on October 25th, went without a hitch. Some movement with people going around. They, had it hosted at the Dutch Goose, and then also off another location up in El Dorado Hills, I believe, and then everybody was phoning in their requests for station assignments, so it's a nice annual tradition. Just a little sharing with you on the California Fire Assistance Agreement, the CFAA. This, I'm just sharing what I'm involved with, and I've been involved with on the CFAA committee for the last 12, 13 years. This is an agreement that is managed by California Office of Emergency Services. And it's the agreement by which all local government agencies in California are reimbursed when we go on federal and state fires. And so every 5 years, we rewrite the agreement. We're required to start working on that 18 months in advance of the expiration of it. So we've started doing that. I was up in Sacramento about 2 weeks ago, starting on the rewrite. Usually, the federal agencies are normally the ones coming to us with requested changes. And, our goal as a local government representative is to always ensure that local government is made whole financially, and that they don't create processes that become too cumbersome and onerous for local governments to be willing to respond. So that's usually record-keeping requirements, which the feds love. And like I said, for local government, we want to keep it as simple as possible, get us close to being whole, and then, we don't want to do anything to discourage any local government agency from being willing to respond, in the California Master Mutual Aid System. It is the standard bearer in the entire United States. And so, again, that's generally my role in there, is to ensure local government's interests are represented. Local government's not signatory to it. It's just, I think, 6 federal agencies and CAL FIRE that are the signers. But obviously, they are very interested in local government's perspective, since if they come down with an agreement that we're not interested in participating in, there just won't be any responses. Then the last thing on there was just, I wanted to share with you about a meeting we had with Woodside Fire Protection District. And it was, they have a new fire chief up there. Chief Kusheri reached out to me and asked what we were doing related to our cash sitting in the bank. They're kind of in that same position that we were in 2 years ago, where they've got you know, a lot of investments, well, cash sitting idly, not earning a lot. So I brought our specialist, our subject matter expert, and Elaine gave them a master class in
Cash management.
investment policies, our process for hiring an investment manager, the RFP process. It was their fire chief, their finance manager, and one of their board members who had some background in that. Really, really valuable hour and a half that we spent there sharing information and kind of helping them head in a direction similar to ours. So thank you, Elaine and Francine both. And that is it for my fire chief's report.
Any questions? Robert?
The thing that I was thinking about in terms of Maui, you know, you said they put a name on the, I guess, the fire engine. And I guess it's almost like memorializing that activity or the relationship between there and here. So I was wondering if there was anything that we can have, I don't know what, here that kind of show that connection, memorialize this whole situation in some form. I don't know if it's a sticker on the wall or.
Commendation.
I don't know.
It might, yeah.
You can frame
I think
this.
that's a great idea.
Yeah,
And
great.
maybe it's once they get it in service and have the name painted on it, it might be a picture of it sitting in the engine bay next to one of their yellow engines in the Maui Fire Station, and a little picture and a little, you know, thing, you know, memorializing the donation and that, you know, that relationship.
The right there on the wall.
I actually took a picture of it after they drove it back into the area that it was gonna kind of be settled in. So I'll send it to you, Mark, if you think it's
Yeah,
worth it.
that'd be great. And I'll reach out to Chief Ventura also and ask him about that. So that would be, yeah, it'd be a really neat idea.
Any other comments or questions?
I just have one comment on the CFAA agreement. If there's an opportunity to address their service level agreements as to the speed of reimbursement, it would seem appropriate that they have a reimbursement policy that has a time frame from the date they get the documentation to the time they reimburse.
There are provisions in there in which they're supposed to make timely payment. Yeah. They rarely, as I'm sure Elaine can attest, they rarely live up to that. I don't remember if it's 60 or 90 days or something like that. But I will say they are working on streamlining the process. They've brought it into not quite the 21st century, but they're doing a lot of it online now. And you can actually track the process of your invoices online. So it's interesting that you feel the pain already up at your level. Maybe it's because of our lack of FEMA reimbursements.
Well, it's the amount of additional discussion it takes in finance committee. You know, every meeting we have to go through the chart of what's not reimbursed, what's pending, how does it affect the balances? And then it carries over in year to year period, so it kind of causes an administrative headache on the account balances. So it's just a desire to try to streamline and eliminate some of that.
What I will share is that what you are generally seeing in the finance committee is carryovers related to FEMA reimbursements from the task force.
Yeah.
And these are when we send out strike teams or overhead. But yeah, it's so they usually don't carry over from year to year on those because they're a little bit better, but there have been a lot of complaints ever since I've been on the slowness of reimbursements.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I follow up just because that?
Sure.
I thought the group that you met with was a federal agency, but it's not FEMA, is that right?
This group for the CFAA committee, it is made up of, I'm gonna leave them off, but it's CAL FIRE, Cal OES, US Forest Service, National Park Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, US Fish and Wildlife Service, and Bureau of Land Management, and I maybe leave
The
one
state
out.
park part of it.
No, state parks is not a part of it, but, so, separate from the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA.
I see, and so does the federal government reimburse California for its emergencies?
In this agreement, yeah, the feds are reimbursing local government agencies when we respond to federal incidents on federal lands, like in their national parks or national forests. We get fully reimbursed for those. And if it happens to be in state responsibility area, CAL FIRE is reimbursing us. Yeah, really, the state of California is reimbursing us. So, yes.
I don't think I ever realized, so there's basically 3 agencies that are reimbursing us. There's Cal OES for state level stuff. There's the one you're just talking about for state work, but in national properties, land, and then there's FEMA.
So, yeah, when we get deployed, when our force gets deployed, OES is, I think, a coordinating agency. We get reimbursed through Department of Homeland Security, FEMA. When we go to a brush fire on state lands, we get reimbursed through CAL FIRE. That's basically the state of California. When we go to a brush fire and it's in the National Park Service or in the forest, like the Los Padres National Forest, the U.S. Forest Service, the federal government reimburses us. It just depends. If we happen to go, on something that's on a Native American reservation, the Bureau of Indian Affairs will reimburse us. So.
I've just never seen a receivable from anyone except FEMA.
They pay pretty quickly, because if they didn't, local government would stop responding. So a lot of these agencies that respond, you can imagine, aren't in a position like us where they have cash reserves to be able to foot the payroll. Some of them are small volunteer organizations and they don't have any cash in the bank, so they can't even pay their employees' payroll until they get reimbursed. So you can imagine that if their reimbursements weren't somewhat timely, they would stop going.
Thank you.
So Mark, quick question to follow up on the CFAA discussion. You said that you're the local government representative essentially?
Mhm.
So how many local government representatives
3.
are? Okay, so just based on the different, I didn't even know.
Yeah, one is a representative of volunteer departments, one is a combination, paid and volunteer, and one is a full paid, and I'm the full paid representative.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, any other questions or? Okay, thank you, Chief. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendars, items 2 through 6?
Virginia,
Sure, yeah,
I'd like to pull 3, 4, and 6 off, please.
okay. Is there a motion to approve items 2 and 5 on the consent calendar?
I move we approve items 2 and 5 on the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, it's been moved by Director Bloom, seconded by Director Jones. Any discussion? Okay, roll call please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom.
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Salone is absent, Director Crowley.
Aye, so that motion carries. And we'll go on to item 3. Chuck, you pulled off the treasurer's report for the month ended September 30th, 2023.
Yes, I actually might come back to this once we're talking about a later item where we're discussing some of this, but I specifically just wondered if I'm referring to the camp reports, the summary page 1 right now, which is at the end of the actual, it's attachment B to the treasurer's report. And I'm trying to learn how to read these things. I'm glad we're getting all this information, and it's very interesting, but in terms of knowing what our yield is, if I look on page 1, which, let's see what, that would be page 18 of the whole report, I see there's a current yield of 5.55%. Is that the best measure of how our portfolio is doing, or is there a better place to look?
No, so the 5.5% is actually the current yield, basically what, if you invest now for camp, that's what you're gonna earn, basically, that 5.55%. So that doesn't mean that we actually earn 5.55% with our initial investment. So in terms of the performance in itself, there's actually, I think Monique is here as well from TFM, so she might be able to talk about it a little bit more clearly. clearer better than me, but basically the performance report is going to be on a quarterly basis. So the actual performance of our investments is gonna get reported out on a quarterly basis. So here right now, you won't see it because we don't have the full quarter yet because we started in August. So, but once we have the December report done, then, you know, all the performance, like returns for the camp and even the investment account, like the managed account, will be on, you know, the report. But right now, it's hard to tell, basically just on the report, how much is our current, our, you know, average, or not average, but our rate of return basically from, you know, our current investment.
Okay, so when we get to December, just a request, if you could somehow maybe give us a one-page staff report of what to look at, or what page to look at, or what line item to look at, or something, just to help us find the relevant things, because by the time you go through all these numbers here, it's hard to know where the meat of all this is.
Sure.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Just to comment on the statistics that Elaine was referencing, for the camp portfolio of securities in particular, this monthly report is going to focus on the interest earnings in the portfolio and not the total return presentation, which will be shown on your quarterly reports. But if you're looking for the interest that you earn on the portfolio, what you want to look at is your yield at cost figure for the securities portfolio. And that is shown on page 3 of the camp statement. And as of the end of September, that portfolio yield was 5.26%. Which
Could
is
you
what-
slow down just a little bit, page 3, you said?
Yeah, page 3 of the camp statement.
Bottom right of page 3.
I keep finding page 1 over and over again.
That's actually page 387 of the packet, Director.
Oh, they-
Page 387?
387.
I don't have that.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, this
It's not here, but
This focuses on the security. Focuses on the security portfolio and has the characteristics for the securities portfolio. And the yield to maturity at cost is what the portfolio will earn. And that is the interest that the portfolio would generate. On a quarterly basis, we will break that figure down for you by quarter, showing the interest earned over the quarter, as well as the price change in the securities themselves to give you your total return.
So what we're looking at on this page 3 is just 1 month segment of that whole thing, is that correct?
That's correct. And when we do the quarterly performance, you will see that over the 3-month horizon and then longer term periods as our relationship matures.
Okay, thank you very much, that's very helpful, just.
Teacher, so Alan, are you saying that, you mentioned earlier that there were, I guess, we won't see any dividends or income until next month?
no, so basically what I'm saying is, the net return or the net performance, it's not gonna show up here. But basically, as what Monique mentioned is, our return here, if we actually hold it at maturity, is at 5.26%.
Yeah, and the statement does show income earnings on the first page.
First page? Okay.
The page just before the page we were speaking about, it shows earnings on a cash basis and an accrual basis for the portfolio. But again, this is just a month presentation. When we present this on a quarterly basis, you will see these figures for the 3 months of the quarter, as well as longer term periods, depending as our relationship progresses.
I have a question. So Chuck, this is a pretty standard type of statement. Do you really want Elaine to give a synopsis when this is probably what we're gonna get every month?
Well, if it's on page 3 every month, no, it wouldn't be necessary, but if it's on page 11, then it would be helpful.
I mean, usually the summaries are like at the beginning of the rest of the portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely work with Monique on how to actually, present, not present the report, but maybe a synopsis as what Director Bernstein mentioned. If, what's really relevant for the board is, the performance or the returns for that specific quarter, then it might really be worth it to actually presented at the beginning, very beginning, so, I mean, you don't have to, worry about, finding all of the stuff on the, like, 300-page report, basically.
We have the consolidated summary statement too, so how would your thing be, your statement be different from the consolidated summary statement?
I guess if it's just like, let's say, two numbers, the performance for account is this, and then the, the performance or the return for, the investment account is this. Because again, the consolidated, I'm assuming, Monique can correct me if I'm wrong. So the quarterly statement wouldn't be the same as this one, right? Because we would have like pages for the actual performance.
What,
That's
but for the quarter?
For the quarter.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Quarter versus monthly.
yeah, so the quarterly statements are gonna be more of a summary of the 3 months.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, and so this is just every month, but Chuck's asking for every month, and it sounds like.
No, it wasn't, I didn't know it was a quarterly until he said it.
Oh,
I was
yes,
trying to
it's quarterly.
find out.
okay, got it, okay,
For this statement, it's only 1 month.
Right,
correct.
Yeah.
Because we haven't only been with them for.
but now I know how to read the monthly, so when we get the quarterly, I'd like to know how to read the quarterly, and then I'm set.
So can I ask you just a simple question? I assume you probably Derek chime in on that too. Is it my understanding that on the quarterly, this one statement that we have on the cash dividend and income, that that's 171,000 or? Am I for that, for just for that 1 month?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
That number is good. I mean, I want to just be clear with everybody. Monique can jump in too. That number will move around as we get fully invested
That's
in the managed account. This is reflective of a midpoint process where we are partially invested in the managed account, but most of the money, or 34 million as of this point in time, was still in the camp fund. So it will fluctuate, but I think what the board will find is now that we're fully invested, as we get to the monthly and the quarterly reports, the numbers will be pretty consistent month to month and quarter to quarter.
Yeah,
There'll be more consistency. It's definitely more difficult to read when you're partially invested and moving from the kind of characterized as the money market fund or the camp fund, and you're moving into the managed account fund.
I was curious to see the difference from monthly that, like, as you said, move from one to the other.
Right.
But I'm pretty excited about this one, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, if you look at the numbers on the page 3, the yield to maturity at cost, we're going to be actually at a slightly lower yield than the camp pool. But then to the left of that chart, it shows you a distribution that says we're locking in that rate over time.
That's right.
As those interest rates start adjusting down and going down, we'll still be at a higher rate because we're investing for a longer period of time, or longer duration, as they would refer to it.
Okay, a lot of
So I have a quick question, Elaine, when are we gonna, how are we gonna do put the remaining 54 million into the the 34 million into the managed account from the camp pool? Is it gonna be like laddered in there, or are you just waiting for an opportunity to put all of it in there, or I mean, how is that?
No, so basically what we actually agreed on when we actually agreed with the benchmark and then the amount of, funds we're gonna invest in, actual securities, it's gonna be $57 million. So right now our managed account is around 54 million. So by October, we're gonna be fully invested, like that full 56, 57 million is gonna be there. So anything that's above that, we're gonna keep it in camp, because again, that's actually our a more liquid portfolio. That's where we actually, withdraw funds for our day-to-day, operating expenses. And as I've mentioned in the past, I think instead of keeping it on, Bank of America, we're not earning much money. We are actually investing it in camp, or a part of it in LAVE as well. So we are actually maximizing our interest even with our liquid funds. So that's kind of like our strategy. It's like a two-way strategy. One is a more liquid one, and one is still a little bit, it's still liquid, but it's
It's more
it's more invested. It's longer term. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really long term, 0 to 3 years basically is the average. But basically, it's a longer duration period for that investment.
Okay, great. Chuck?
Yeah, I just want to add positively, I mean, I was very disappointed in the past what we've been doing, and, I mean, getting a yield of over 5% as of now, I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, it's a huge amount of money, I mean, every month it pays for like one position more. So we were getting nothing before with WAIF and Bank of America. So anyway, good work.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Well,
this
I'll move
item?
to approve.
To accept the treasurer's report, so moved by Director Bernstein, is there a second?
I second.
Nope.
Oh, you said
No, seconded by Director Bloom.
it? I didn't hear anybody else do it.
Roll call, please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solomon, absent, Director Cry.
Aye. So that motion carries, and Chuck, we'll go to item 4 on the consent, which is to approve a resolution accepting supplemental funding grant amendment EMW 2022-00049-A09 in amending the fiscal year 2023-24 California Task Force 3 Fund 722 budget in the amount of $158,477. So you pulled this off.
Yes, because I don't know if this is what we discussed last meeting or 2 meetings ago or not, I mean, when you see something where, oh, we're getting $158,000, I'm trying to understand if this is actually an award of money, or this is where we're finding out that they're taking away our rent for our building, and we're getting a whole bunch of equipment we have to maintain now.
Can I address that? The finance committee went through this, so I'll just give the finance committee view of it.
Okay.
So this was an additional grant from the federal government that went to every agency. So every agency of all the task forces got $158,477. And it was directed as part of the grant process that it had to go to the equipment bucket for the purchase of equipment that's expired and needs to be refreshed. So they basically increased the task force's budget for the year by the $158,000 with a directive of it being specific for an equipment program.
But is there a string attached then with, it then becomes our responsibility to maintain all our equipment and we're not reimbursed for it?
This is, John, you may have to jump in there on that question. Go ahead, John.
So in 2017, the 2017 fiscal budget, so if you have to go back to and understand how the relationship between the fire district and the federal government and Cal OES developed. Originally in 1993, it was a 50-50%, I guess it would be process where the federal government would only give us 50% of the cost of the cash. So the fire district had to pay 50% of the cash cost in order to get the other 50% from the federal government. And that changed probably in, I guess, the early 2000s, right around 2001, after in that area. And since that time frame, they in early 2001, they gave us funding to buy cash. And the problem with the cash was all 28 teams bought different equipment. And that was an issue for, I guess it would be maintaining the equipment on the federal side. So fast forward 10 years later, the federal government purchased a cash for all 28 teams at one time. And then they issued that cash to all 28 teams, and the primary cash from the early 2000s became our secondary cash. This secondary, or our primary cash that was purchased 15, 18 years ago is aging. And it, there's many things that are batteries and anything with any type of a rubber seal or neoprene, they all start to degrade and fail. So in 2017, the federal government did a report for Congress that basically showed that there was a deficiency of, worked out to be $1.2 million per task force of equipment that we own that was in need of replacement. So what has been happening since 2018 is every year when the federal government goes through their budgetary process, there's excess monies left over, And the federal government takes those excess monies and gives them to the 28 task forces, whatever they can scrounge together. And they use those dollar amounts to reinvigorate the cash that we currently have, right? So this dollar amount is $158,000. I think the 2022 supplemental was in the $90,000 range. Don't quote me on that, Director, I don't wanna lie, but that's basically what it was. And I think in 2018, it was even a different dollar amount. And what happens is they give us these dollars, and then at a later date, probably in 3 to 6 months, they'll come out with a program directive and state that money we gave you is supposed to be used to purchase this off that list that was given to Congress in June 6th of 2018. So that's kind of where that is, because the program office is very aware of the issues with the aging of our cash, and they want to make sure that they give us funding to address those concerns. And they have basically once all of the $1.2 million, or whatever that dollar amount was from 2018 is provided, and we theoretically all have new cash, then they'll work on the next problem.
So let me ask another way, because I understand much of what you said, but this is a very complex subject. Are we incurring any new obligation by accepting this $158,000?
Negative.
And is there any way that it might be better for us not to accept it? Would we be better off in any way by not taking this money?
We would not be better off at all.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a
I'll
motion
move
to
that we
approve?
accept this.
Okay, moved by Director Bernstein, seconded by Director Jones. Roll call, please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
So that motion carries, and we're on to item 6, which is to approve a resolution ratifying the fire chief's decision to donate fire engine 1 to the Maui County Fire Department instead of engine 77. Chuck, you remove this from the consent calendar?
Yeah, I did because I wanted to, I think I want to abstain from voting for it. Let me be clear, I think the decision the chief made was absolutely the right one. I think we should have done that. I just don't think that the process of approving ex post facto decisions made in the past is the right thing for the board to be doing. And I don't feel comfortable making that a regular process of some sort. I mean, I don't think it's necessary. I think what the chief did is kind of within that realm of discretion that he has financially. I think the difference between these two engines in terms of their market value and terms the mileage was a little different, but I mean, I don't think there was anything substantively different here. I don't think the chief needs this. And I just don't like the idea of after the fact saying it's okay, just because I think the chief did the right thing. I would have done exactly the same thing. So I approve of the decision, but I just don't think the process is right.
So maybe I will just respond, because I think it's in some ways my suggestion that this be made before you. The action approving the donation was very specific, that you approve the donation of engine 77. And so my advice was that there was no way to read that as authorizing the donation of engine 1. So, but at the same time, I agree with the substance of what you're saying, the concept of what you're saying, which is it was not that big a deal and did not, in my view, require putting a pause and not sending the boat to Hawaii at all. But in an abundance of caution, I suggested that this be on the agenda, so that the board was on record as approving after the fact the decision that the fire chief made.
But what's the meaning of approving something after the fact?
You're right, you're right, but and it certainly will never become common practice if the chief brought ratifications of his decisions to you every month. He probably, that just would not last long with this board. But in this particular case, doing nothing seemed to have its own perils of members of the board might think, wait a second, how come you never asked us to approve this? And so that's why my recommendation was that the board ratify this. And as I hear all the reasons you just said you think it was the right idea, that to me indicates that you should vote to ratify this, if you believe that. You're not endorsing the ability to ratify decisions on a routine basis, but this, for the reasons I just explained, was on your agenda today.
Is there any other wording that would be appropriate, or is this, I don't know if this was done.
This is exactly the right use of the word ratify, in my view, to bless a decision made by the chief that is technically outside his authority, that you are making it right by after the fact blessing it.
And let me ask, in hindsight, just for the future, is there anything that we should have done with the original motion
Sure.
to not have done this?
In hindsight, which is always perfect,
2020.
you know, you could have authorized the donation of a fire engine without having to say fire engine 77, and then there would have been no need for a ratification.
Well, so I want to commend Steve and the chief for their desire to have this particular donation be as transparent as possible. And actually the chief contacted me about this, and I actually, agreed with this process because we were so specific about that particular engine. And, but because I was gonna go to Maui and, pay for my own way to go, I actually had the chief contact the vice president to get his thoughts, because I didn't want there to be an appearance of, a conflict of interest. And I mean, I just think that the more transparent and the more people know about our process, and yet this was not perfect, the better. And so that's why the chief sent out his email to the board and mentioned the president and the vice president, having, talked to the president and the vice president and general counsel about this. So thank you, Mark, and Steve, for suggesting this. I think now everyone knows that we ended up donating engine one, which was pretty much the exact same engine, but with a different number, it had a few more miles on it, which Maui Fire didn't mind, instead of engine 77. And because we'd had that out there for so long that engine 77 was gonna be donated, I thought this was the right way to approach this, just to be totally transparent with the generous residents who are donating this engine to Maui Fire.
Through the chair.
Yes, Robert.
I think as we move forward in the future, I think it's important. I know there's something I think on the back today talk about policy and procedures. I think we need to figure out how to codify in our policy and procedures. We could pretty much the language that was used tonight by Steve in terms of, so that there is no ambiguity moving forward. Because the perception is always important, as you know, because I think we talk about that a lot in terms of perception. And I think it's important that we are hopefully giving the community tonight by this ratification that everything is still up board. It's very important, because when I first read it, I was saying, what is the city doing right now? Going behind our back. But then as I thought through it, sometimes it's about timing. And sometimes you have to act when, you've got 2 days before you take things down to the ship. You gotta move right down. So sometimes having that leeway to be able to act like that is important. When it becomes a pattern, then that's a whole nother question. This is kind of a one-off kind of situation that happened. And so, if I was in the chief's spot, I would have done the same thing, in terms of just to move what has already been approved, but it's just changing from red to yellow. I mean, it's the same thing. What's the difference other than red to yellow? So I made that speech, to say that I'm all for this moving forward, agreeing with this, but I think as we look at our policy and procedures, if we can integrate this into that process.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I would just real quickly add, since I was contacted on it before it occurred, is there was no change change in the fiscal value of the two engines. So to me, it was a de minimis request to make the shift from 1 to 77 or 77 to 1. And then secondly, I did think it was important for the reasons mentioned that we actually reflect in our documentation that we actually did formally donate engine 1, not engine 77, because of the fact that it was so specific. And I tend to agree with Steve that I think we should be careful about being overly specific in something that can be more general. And that would have avoided the situation. But given the circumstances, when I was contacted, it was a pretty simple decision, which is there was no change in value. We're gonna auction one engine and donate one engine. Which one we auction, which one we donate, was really irrelevant. They're the same value. And then secondly, I did think it was important that we have it properly reflected in board minutes that this somewhere along the way was approved by the board.
Well, especially since we were so specific with the other
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have anything in the record that says.
Right, engine one's gonna
Engine
be
one's
donated,
donated.
right.
So it was really for those purposes. It's a pretty simple decision.
Virginia?
Yes, Chuck.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I would have done exactly the same thing, and I'm not questioning the decision. But let's just, because I think the topic's important, let's hypothesize for a moment that there was, the only thing we had available was a ladder truck, and it was worth 3 times as much. What would we do in that situation?
I wouldn't have, yeah, so this is, first of all, this will not become common practice, loud and clear. And that was not my common practice in my past job. The only time I sought ratification for my last board was when we had like grant application deadlines that were time sensitive. And so there's kind of a standing procedure, you could get ratification for approval to apply for a grant, And that said, had it not been de minimis or it had not been in substance what the board had approved, I wouldn't have made that decision.
But
So
we could have, and I don't think we should have, by the way, but we could have called a meeting 24 hours later and just approved it, right?
Well, I thought about that.
No, but I'd like to know what's in our quiver, that is what we could do in that situation in the future. Calling a meeting with.
So my advice was that this was not important enough to justify calling a meeting because of the reasons that everybody has discussed.
And I agree, but if it were important, we could do that.
Absolutely.
And
That
we-
would have been my
Yes.
recommendation if the chief had said, I'm donating a deck of cards instead of this fire truck, is that okay? I would say, wait a second, get the board's advance approval, let's call a meeting in advance.
So I actually discussed that with the chief, Chuck, about calling a special meeting, and the chief told me exactly what Steve just mentioned now. I mean, because it was de minimis, but getting back, that's a different issue than the hypothesis that you just gave out about a ladder truck. Because our decision-making process for this was based on so many other factors. So I think that comparing the ladder truck donation example that you brought up with this
I'm not.
are very, very
Virginia,
different.
I'm contrasting them.
Here's
Yeah.
the interrupt just because I think
Yeah.
this is going through,
Yeah.
we need to take it.
You wanna-
Let me just, please forgive me if I'm opinion, right, I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
When you use the word our, we, it excludes those that are not considered in the process, may not be considered in the process, and that's optics. And so whenever possible, we really need to kind of be conscious of that, because that's what splits creativity in relationship. And we don't need to go down that road. And that's where I think if we keep this conversation going, that's where we're gonna go. I think we understand what we need to do in correcting the future. And I'm just saying, let's just tuck it away and deal with it when it's time.
In our policies.
And policies and procedures, because I think, and no one said it was a bad idea, it was the optics. And anyway.
I agree, and I move that we approve a resolution ratifying the decision.
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein?
I'm gonna vote for it, aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Jones? Director Trolley?
Aye, so that motion carries. Thank you. And we'll go to our regular agenda item, regular agenda section. Item number 7, accept the fiscal year 2023-24 property tax revenue budget. Elaine, do you wanna kick this item off?
So basically this report is really just to give the board an idea of, what our current, property tax revenue estimates for the current fiscal year. And in turn, this will also give us, some sort of analysis of whether or not we should, amend adopted, revenue budget that we just did last June. So just based on the report, every year we actually receive, a levy letter from the County of San Mateo, basically like providing us some information about property tax estimates for the current fiscal year for some categories, and that those categories are the secured property tax, unsecured property tax, HOPTR, unitary tax, and ERAC shift. So those estimates that you see on the table on page 2 of the report, which is page 436 of the packet. So those are actually the estimates that came from the County of San Mateo. So for SB 813, on the other hand, it's still largely based on our adopted budget. So there's no other additional information, relevant information that would actually give us some sort of an idea of a revised estimate of what our property tax revenue for that specific category would be. And then for the last two, which is ERAC rebate and RDA distributions, which are for the RPDDF, as another term for that, is it's really just based on historical distribution percentage like information that I gathered for the past 5 years. So when I did some sort of analysis on the RDA distributions, there seems to be a pattern on how it's distributed, because we already got some information on how much are we actually going to get this December for that distribution. And based off that, and based on the historical information, like the percentage wise on how much they're actually distributing on the first half of the year versus second half of the year, that's where I actually calculated the estimates for the RDA distributions. And I think this for the ERAC rebate, again, this is not an issue, but we actually just discussed this in the adoption of the budget. We are actually anticipating to receive the full amount basically of our estimate, because we only adopted 50% of the ERAC rebate. We were very conservative in terms of adopting a revenue budget. But in terms of what we're receiving, we're still expecting to receive the full amount for this fiscal year. That's why you see that the estimate for the ERAC rebate on the table is actually twice as much as our adopted revenue. So overall, our estimated, again, this is really just for the property tax revenue category. The estimated amount is $80.1 million, which is $7.8 million higher than the adopted budget of $72.4 million. And staff's recommendation again is to accept the report and not change or do anything as of now for our current revenue budget, since we actually have enough funds to cover for our expenditures for the given period.
Any questions or comments? Chuck?
Yeah.
Thanks, Elaine.
Let me just ask two questions, two questions right off the bat. On 436, the third column over, where you have the estimated property tax revenue there, the 80.1 million you just referred to. There's eight numbers in there. 4 of them have data from the letter from the county.
Correct.
But 4 of them do not, and I'm not arguing with them, I'm just curious. What makes you feel that the SB 813 and then the RPTTF distribution and the 2 ERAF numbers, do you have another source for verifying those numbers?
There's actually no source on that, so this is really just based on my research and just based on historical information, as I mentioned. For SB 813, I think there's really no additional information that I gathered. So what we actually budgeted is still what we are expecting for this fiscal year. Of course, that would change once we receive additional information as we get the funds. So we can actually predict, better once we receive, started receiving those funds. But as of now, again, the same estimate that we have last June, it's still gonna be the same for this month. That's why I did not change the estimate on that. For the
Can
art.
I just stop you there for a second, because they're not exactly the same numbers. The 1559, I mean, 1.559 for SB 13 is identical, but the RPTTF distribution is different. The ERAF rebate, well, that's the 50%, but the ERAF shift number is not exactly the same.
Yeah,
either.
what I'm mentioning is actually just for SB 813. So for RPTTF, so what I did is again, this is actually based on the historical distribution pattern that I've noticed when I actually did the analysis for the past 5 years. So basically, what I did here is we actually got a little bit more information about RPTTF distribution. There was some sort of a letter that we received from the county as well, but it's not actually the full amount. So it's actually like, the amount that they're gonna distribute this December. So what I did was, since it's not really the full amount, so I gathered, like the historical data and see, hey, for the first half of the year, this is what we received for the past 5 years. And then for the second half of the year, this is what we received for our RPTTF distributions. And based off that, and then, I'm just gonna mention that, these RDA distributions are kind of like arbitrary in a way, so we cannot really predict how much are we gonna receive. But when I analyze, the data for the past 5 years, the historical information, there seems to be a pattern on how they are distributing it. Like for the first half, they're distributing 66% of, the full, the 66% of the full amount that we're gonna see for a given year. So that pattern, so that average, percentage distribution that I, observed or, analyzed for the past 5 years, that's what I actually use to kind of like predict for this given year. Hey, it looks like, if there's a pattern of 56% is gonna get received for the first half, and then the second half is 44%. So I just made it whole in a way.
So, did you know that back in June, is this based on new data, or could you, if you'd had enough time, you could have done that analysis back in June and you would have had a different budget number?
That's actually the analysis that I did back in June as well. So it just so happened that we got more information, like for this, I think we got more info, I think last month basically, for what we're gonna receive, like partially for this given fiscal year. So last June, I did the same analysis, but I kind of like average it out in a way, because again, I don't have like, the current information of what we're gonna receive for this fiscal year. But since we have like a little bit more information now, I still did the same methodology, but with better information.
So the new information was for the RPTTF or for
Correct.
both? And what about the ERAF? Are you having?
ERAF rebate, it's just basically, I haven't, I haven't seen or I haven't heard any news about that for the ERAF that they're just gonna distribute like 50%, 70%, or 80%.
Okay, but what about the shift? I misspoke.
The shift it's actually on the levy letter as well. So it's actually, I think it's on, the last sentence, I believe.
Oh, but excuse me, then I may have missed that. So there were actually 5 numbers there, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so the shift is updated a little bit.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So
And
Chuck,
then-
can I interject just for 1 second?
Yeah.
Just because the committee did review these, the view of the committee is these are updated estimates and projections that staff's providing, but that since we're not adjusting the budget in any way, this is talking about excess money that will come in, where the decisions as to what the actual numbers are will be decided at the end of the fiscal year when we have to allocate them to whatever we're going to allocate them to as excess funds at the end of the year. So the general view on it was, these are staff estimates coming from a number of different sources, either from the county or from internal research. But the relevancy of the estimates is their best projection, and it gives us an idea of the kind of excess funds we have at the end of the year. But since we're not allocating them, there's no risk of these projections causing any fiscal impact if they're incorrect. So I just wanted to make sure that
Okay, yeah,
the view
no,
of
that's
the
true,
committee,
but we're
the
being a
view of the
little,
committee was,
we're being a little bit cavalier with $8 million. I mean, this is something that, as we talk, the facilities committee meets and talks about what kinds of cash we're gonna have for facilities. I
yeah,
think-
but ultimately, and I'm new to the board, but I think I was here for that part of the process where at the end of the year, fiscal year, we allocated the money to particular things, whether it be the CalPERS deficit or whether it be the capital improvement fund or anything else. So we're not at a point of making any decisions based on this data right now, as much as seeing a staff projection for what we should anticipate for the end of the fiscal year.
Chair.
Yes, Robert.
So, I think one thing we could probably maybe start looking at is looking at what waterfall we're gonna try to create, in this, if these numbers are true, if these are excess funds that are coming in at the end of the day, where are priorities for expenditure? And I think if anything, if we don't have it already, but at least spend some time talking about that, sort of in advance of when and if they do come down the road.
Chuck?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the other question that I had that goes back to page 11 of the treasurer's report.
That was in consent, right? Is that, and that's what
It
you're.
was pulled from consent, but yes. Page 11, and I'm sorry, and that was item number 3. I'm looking at the chart here. The first column has the adopted budget. And here, it has a property tax number.
72.4.
Well, it has, yeah, it has 72371.
Yeah.
So that's, when you did the budget then, you use that same number that you have, that 72371 here. Okay, so this goes back to the budget number. I just wanted to verify that these were the same.
That's on page 436, it's the same budget number.
The same number,
The
yeah.
only number that's changing is the projection, which is staff providing updated estimates based on their most recent information.
Yes. It also appears, just for data's sake, I mean, this is something I voted against the budget because of this. I think we were overstating our expenditures by 2 million also. So understating revenue by 8 million and overstating expenditures by 2 million, it means we've got an extra $10 million. Again, I said it back then, I think we were being a very cavalier about 10 million bucks. That we say, plus or minus, who's gonna worry about 10 million here or there? But that's a lot of money and it makes a big difference. It could build half of a fire station or it's a lot of money here that we're just sort of blowing off to the end of the year. So anyway.
I don't agree with the comment that we're blowing it off.
I don't either.
Staff's providing projections and updates on it, so we have transparency to it.
Full transparency.
And to Robert's point is, it does make sense that we start the discussions before we get to that point in time about how we want to allocate this kind of funds at the end of the year. But I don't think it's being blown off by any shape or form.
It's not, and it's
So
gone.
I kind of disagree with that characterization.
And it's gone through the committee and now it's coming to the board, so it's had two potentially public ways of.
So I move we accept the fiscal 23-24 property tax revenue budget.
So clarification, please. The item is, the request is to accept the report. The budget has already been adopted. So I think that
Correct.
might be just
That's
an
what he's
error in the document that you're reading from. So your motion was just to accept the budget.
treasurer's report.
That's not what Dr. Boone just mentioned, so that's why.
No, that's what, oh, I thought that's the.
No, he's right. So what the thing we're approving, I thought we already approved the.
You've already approved the budget. The
Correct.
action requested here, which frankly is almost unnecessary because it's an information,
It's already
would be
done.
to accept his report,
Can
not
I,
to
can
accept
I
the new
move
budget.
that last year it was upon consensus, the board accepted the report, you don't need to make a motion.
Okay.
Well, I actually think since there's a motion on the table in a second, we should just make the motion to accept.
Okay, but I'm requesting that the maker of the motion rephrase
I
the
will
motion.
rephrase my motion that I move that the board accept
Report.
The treasurer's
the
report for
treasurer's
the month,
report.
for the month ended September 30th.
This is a property tax revenue budget.
Yeah, this is where
You're not, the
I'm
budget has
sorry,
already
I'm
been
sorry,
accepted.
I'm sorry. He's looking at the wrong thing.
Call
It's-
order.
Yes, so let me,
Call
yes.
order.
yes, so Robert, let me just say, we're on item number 7, which is the fiscal year 2023-24 property tax revenue budget. Okay, that is the item that we are
It's
on.
entitled. That's what.
No, Chuck was referring back to the previous report, which we already accepted.
We already accepted. the
Yes,
report.
but this is item 7, which is to accept the fiscal year 2023-24 property tax. So if you'd like to,
I think the confusion here is that it's called budget,
Yes.
when it's a forecast, it's a report. So I move that we accept the fiscal 23-24 property tax revenue forecast as presented in the staff report.
And I'll second that.
okay. So there is a motion and a second. So, Michelle, roll call please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
I,
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye. So that motion carries and we're on to item 8, which is to approve a resolution waiving the requirements of the purchasing policy and authorizing the fire chief to award the purchase of 2 2024 Ford F-450 crew cab dual flatbed trucks to Saramonte Ford in an amount not to exceed $184,000. Chief?
Hopefully, this will be quick. What we're asking the board to do is approve the purchase of 2 vehicles that we've already budgeted for and have been included in the approved budget. What we're asking also the board to do, as we're talking about here, is waiving the requirements of the purchasing policy. Normally, our purchasing policy is written in such a way that over a certain amount, it requires an RFP. That's just not practical with the purchase of vehicles where you get 3 quotes. So that's what we have here, is we have 3 quotes, and we're asking the board to approve the purchase from the lowest responsible quoter. So with that, I will entertain any questions.
Chuck?
You say, I support what we're doing and so forth, so it's not the substance, but I don't understand exactly what we're waiving. We got 3 quotes, we're taking the low bidder. And do we have a faulty policy or?
You don't have a faulty policy, in my view. The policy requires not just accepting quotes, but actually issuing a specification with and advertising it and doing things that, as the chief mentioned, may not be practical when we have a limited source of potential vendors, in this case dealers. So we did get competition here, but we didn't get the same kind of competition. It would be too, the policy would have to be hundreds of pages longer to have different policies for different equipment. If you're buying cars, you do this, breathing apparatus, you do that, so it just has a blanket requirement based on dollar value.
Is there any way we could modify our requirements so that
Sure.
it meets
This board rejected the notion of a formalized process that just required 3 quotes and asked for more process. But if you would like to change it so that for any kind of procurement, all you need is just to get 3 quotes, you could do that too. But that's not what the board discussed and adopted a couple of years ago.
And was there a dollar difference?
Over $100,000 ordinarily requires a more formal process.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call please, Michelle?
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye, so that motion carries. Item 9, approve a resolution to amend the fiscal year 2023-24 capital improvement project expenditure budget in the amount of $54,000 for Station 1 pre-development costs. Chief or
Chief,
John
what's
Hitchcock?
going-
I don't know.
John's not here tonight.
Yeah, so.
Nancy, you want this or do you want me to do it? Okay.
Director Jones could do it.
Stand by.
Robert can do it.
I'm gonna do a team.
Francine's pulling it up on the way, Francine, it's pretty, you know,
Okay.
it's one, yeah, it's great, it is a
It's
straight.
very
Pretty
straightforward.
straightforward.
Francine?
Yeah, so this is for the Station 1 pre-development costs that weren't included or part of the budget that was approved for the Station 1 design services. And so John Hitchcock has reached out, oops,
Page 457.
yeah. So John Hitchcock has reached out to the different vendors to get estimates on each of the phases. And has also provided a little bit of cushion and has estimated that the additional amount would be the amount we're asking the board for approval, which is the $54,000 to complete the pre-development costs for this phase 1 of the architectural design.
Any questions, comments? Chuck?
Was it really necessary to come back to us for $54,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's a limit, the 200 is limited?
Because we had a limit on what we had requested for approval for this project. And we hadn't requested anything for the pre-development costs, we didn't have funds, so that's why we're coming back.
And if you look at the report, John's report, he did a good report, chief.
Yeah.
If I may. And it talked about, and there are 5 phases of, that we will be going through. That they would take, in order to get the building to a point where they can start looking at the overall numbers for construction. And so this is the first phase of it, and so over the next couple of months, we're gonna be coming back with for additional increases as we move to those phases of development.
Couldn't we just vote on that now?
Well, we don't know what the cost is.
You don't know
Each
what the
one
cost
is building on the next, like we need the schematics. We need an architect to start, and then we need the schematics, and so we gotta figure out what it looks like, what the building's gonna look like, we got, and so that bidding has to take place, and then there's the next process for that too. So we don't know what the overall numbers is until we start getting the numbers. The people on board, the professionals on board to help us, assess that. And once we make that assessment, then we put numbers to it. And so it's a building process. I mean, we can get, say, approve a $5 million budget, or, we want to come back. But I think the board, based on my experience being on the board, has always been, why are you asking so much without any proof to it? So now there's a proven process for that.
So as a reminder, the board in our last meeting approved the contract that had different tiers based on what the initial pre-design work. So this is simply topping up the budget necessary for the total of the pre-design work. And then once we have the pre-design work, that will guide the decision about whether we're going to do big project or little project. And I won't go into all the variations there because we went through them last meeting. At which time the contract has the capability for it. But what was agreed to with the board is that staff would come back for a secondary approval from the board for the actual specific work order that's going to be executed against that contract, that umbrella contract. So this is simply fixing this one piece of it. It's not changing the rest of the process that we outlined.
Plus the board, I think at one point, for this year, last year, wanted accurate numbers rather than projections.
Yes.
So this is kind of giving the actual numbers based upon some assessment that has been made based on talking to an expert in the field.
I guess I was just trying to say, Tommy, the board's going to approve the specific segments anyway.
Work orders.
The work orders. It just seems like maybe we should put in an extra $200,000 and then we don't have, because you were making it sound like they were gonna come back every month or every period to get more money for this.
Each one of these phases here, or if you see on
Right,
page, so each one of these phases requires a certain amount of work. And each one is building on, each phase is building on the previous phase. So we need to get the information, we need to have the expert look at it, and then develop what that cost would look like for the next phase.
He did build in a contingency in this, if you look at the categories here. He has a small contingency built in that if the arborist report is 21,000 instead of 20, he won't be coming back to us.
Okay.
But the problem was that we had approved 200,000 for the budget for this phase of the project. And when he put all the costs together, it came out to 254, including his $5,000 contingency.
Okay, but I just thought, Robert, maybe I misunderstood a couple minutes ago, it said you were gonna come back to increase the 254 even more later.
No, it'd be the next work
It's
order.
the next
It's the
work
next
order.
The next work order
Yeah.
under the 254.
No, the next work order under the umbrella contract.
which we,
which we agreed at the
Last
last
month.
meeting, we ratified at the last meeting.
Okay.
If I could just share a quick clarification for Director Bernstein's first question about can the fire chief just approve this? While the number of $54,000 is certainly within my purchasing authority, I don't have the authority to increase the budget, only the board does.
So I move that we approve the resolution to amend the capital improvement project expenditure budget in the amount of $54,000 for the Station 1 pre-development costs.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Director Bloom, seconded by Director Jones. Roll call, please.
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Crowley?
Aye, so that motion carries. We're on to our last item on the regular agenda, which is basically an update to the board of directors regarding the policy and procedures manual. Steve and/or the chief or Francine, or all of the above.
I think it's me. I will try to go fast. I'm under directions to continue our world record pace for this evening's meeting. In June of this year, after your annual meeting to make adjustments to your board policy, at that meeting, the board was unable to agree on either specific revisions or even on the best approach, and tasked me along with staff to bring back to the board a new updated manual, and this was discussed in my evaluation. I've discussed this with a couple of board members recently and over the past, and with staff. And as I've started embarking on this work, I feel like I need a little more direction. I don't want to get out ahead of the board, and I want to make sure that I understand what you're asking me to do. The report presents 3 options that occur to me, although there may be others or combinations that you prefer. But to me, the options are, at one end of the spectrum would be to just do some red lines to your current policy to bring it up to date with current legal requirements and maybe adjust some tone and style issues for clarity purposes. At the other end of the spectrum would be based on my experience with other agencies and my surveying best practices with manuals and how they are structured to best serve the board. Bring back to the board really a brand new from soup to nuts manual in a new structure and a new form. It has been 20 plus years since you adopted this manual in its present form, and so you may find it healthy to have a 20-year refresh. If the board wants to be involved in either of those 2 ends of the spectrum, it could form an ad hoc committee to work with me on a more detailed basis and a more regular basis, or you could just trust is not the right word, but direct me to just bring back what I think would be a good starting point for future discussions of the whole board and not leave it to an ad hoc committee. So I guess I just need a little more direction from a majority of the board, what you'd like me to do.
Okay, I'll open it up.
So I can-
Robert?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Robert.
No, I was just gonna say, I have a pretty strong preference for, we have a 20-year-old manual. It's not, there's new forms, new ways of doing it. Steve has experience doing it. I'd recommend option 1, which is let him go off and draft a modern manual for the board. Let us then review it from there and vote on the ratification of it, changes and ratification. But I think it's time for a complete update of the manual.
Robert?
Yeah, I agree with Gary. I think if this is a refresh, probably, we kind of touched on one item, right, earlier in our conversation earlier. And there may be more within the manual that we probably need to look at and get refreshed. I think for me, the question really needs to be, that the question that you ask and get an answer to is, how relevant is our manual to our overall mission, and to our goals, and to our vision as a board for the fire district? I don't know that. When I first came on board, I read a lot of stuff and, ways to do this and that. But how is that, in terms of stepping back and saying, is this reflective of our mission as an institution? It's getting a little bit kind of out there a little bit, but I think all that we do should be tied into our mission and our vision. And I think whether the manual itself, how closely it's tied into it, I think when I read it sometimes, oh, this is a nice process, but, you know, but I sometimes I miss how it really fits in with the mission and vision for the district. So I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, I don't know if that will take the board getting together and having these levels, but you know, I hate to use this word, but it's beautiful. Tell my age, kumbaya moment. So that we can kind of figure out, yes, does this really work for us as an institution? And so, you know, we just kind of get away as a board and get a retreat going and kind of figure this stuff out. And because the technical stuff that Steve brings will bring, hey, this is how technically it works, you know, and we can all will probably agree with that. But really, we need to step back for a moment, just a little bit to look and see.
So my only comment on that, Robert, which I think it's a good reflection, is the board over a course of time will change. Board members will change, the way the board operates will change. But having a foundational policy that outlines the procedures and guidelines under which the board's going to govern itself is a good foundational document. And the one we have, from my lens, doesn't accurately reflect how we operate and doesn't necessarily accurately reflect all the rules and regulations and the changes that have occurred. So I think it's been incrementally updated over the course of time. And every once in a while, after you do a certain number of incremental updates, it's time to set that one aside, start out with a fresh document, starting with a fresh document from council based on his experience of dealing with lots of different boards, and say, hey, these are the kinds of procedures and policies that have worked for lots of boards, gives us something to then orient that discussion around. But I think, does it directly tie to the mission of the district and everything else? I think good governance, it ties to good governance and good policies and procedures will drive board efficiency into the future. And I think it's a good investment of time to look at ways that we can be more efficient by having a policy that reflects kind of the modern way boards operate.
Yeah, I concur with that, because I think, to me, if our board goals and our objectives are not built into that, those policies, those procedures, then we will have a situation where they are always going to be in conflict with each other.
Yeah, I don't know that we build our goals into it, but we do build in the process under which we're going to work on our goals.
Thank you.
Chuck, do you have any?
Well, I have a question for Steve. I mean, the words like, I don't remember the words redo or refresh or whatever, those kind, I'm not sure what those really mean. So let me ask you, would it be your intention to write a rule book where you start at ground zero and say, what should a board have? What's important to a board? Or would you try to keep the rules that are implied or inferred in here and just write them in a more modern way?
Some of each. Don't know how to answer that question otherwise. I would start fresh in terms of structure. But if the content of the current manual seems to me or to you, it's your board, your policy after all, to be important to keep in the new manual, I would endeavor to do that. I don't know how else to answer your question. I don't know if that answers your question, but from a structural point of view, I think there are, I'm envisioning a different structure.
The reason I ask is when I came on the board, there had been a history, which I'm barely familiar with. There had been a history in the past of a bunch of abuses. And so people who had written some of these rules were trying to avoid abuses of the past. And there was also, particularly in one member who was on the board when I came on, there was an effort to kind of redefine democracy or to emphasize democracy in some new ways, where, for example, somebody from the public could put something on the agenda. And there have been some things like that. The current board has removed some of those things, feeling that either it wasn't efficient or it was whatever. And we can also see what's going on in some other local city councils and so forth, where they're making new rules, for example, members can participate on Zoom, but the public cannot participate and things like that. And they're doing that because they're not liking what's coming from the public and so forth. So I guess I would like to avoid us having big, long battles over changes in what we do, just because it's going to take a whole lot of time, and I think distract from, as Robert said, what our mission or goals might be.
I see. My interest in this project is not to change the board or its practices, but to develop a policy that reflects largely what you do and maybe structure it and organize it in a way that is easier to understand. But none of the examples you described, in none of the instances you described, it's not my intent to act as the sixth board member and decide what I think is the best way you should lead this district. I don't view that as my role at all.
Okay, well, it seems to, I think that's appropriate, and I think by rewriting or reorganizing, it's possible that these things will become more apparent to the board, and the board might decide to change some things as a result of that.
Of course.
But I think it probably, and one of the things I was gonna ask you is if you could differentiate, or I'd still ask it, but it sounds like you're not gonna do that much of it anyway. If you could somehow set off some things where you're adding something that you think is important because the law's changed or it's a due diligence issue. In other words, where you're adding a policy as opposed to where you're rewriting an existing policy.
Sure, I think.
Put one in italics or something.
Or I would endeavor to have sort of like a cheat sheet to the new policy that compares back to the old one, and this concept you might find what was over here is now over here, and this is new, so that's helpful direction for sure. I'll try to do that.
Yeah, I think the least amount of rewriting, not because I'm defending the old, but the least amount of changes to the rules would be good, and the board should deal with rule changes, except there's some things we're just ignorant of that relate to legal issues or due diligence, or even your experience on the board where they've gotten in trouble by doing certain things or whatever.
So I hear you, although now I'm a little confused again, to tell you the truth, because I hear two members of the board. What I heard was two members of the board suggesting that build it up from ground zero is a good idea for 20 years, and I hear you suggesting to make as few changes as possible. And so I'm not sure that I've got a consensus for what the board wants. I haven't heard from, so I don't have a majority of the board yet. Virginia would make the
Well,
majority.
I'm just curious, so, I can see where Chuck's coming from, but I can certainly see where Robert and Gary are coming from. I actually view the board policies and procedures as kind of like the rules of engagement for our board and how we govern ourselves, but also govern, to represent the community and be as open as possible and transparent as possible. And I think that some of our old policies or the current policies and procedures reflect that. So in option one, Steve, you have a sentence that says, while continuing to recognize, it's the second sentence, while continuing to recognize the unique attributes and structure of the fire district, this comprehensive restructuring would update and reorganize the manual to reflect current legal requirements and government best practices. So that one sentence, what did you mean by that? I understand the second part, but you have this first part, while continuing to recognize the unique attributes and structure of the fire district. Are you saying that you would then kind of take what's in the current board policies and procedures and see how they might be incorporated or updated to reflect the current best practices legally and, I guess, from a good government perspective? And X out some of the ones that are not so great in the current policies? I mean, I'm just.
So I think what I meant by that is that, and again, I'm here because I wanted direction from you, but what I meant by that sentence was that it would make no sense just to take another agency's policy and scratch out City of Menlo
Yeah,
Park and
that's
write
what we
in
don't want
Menlo
that.
Park Fire District. So that's what I meant by continuing to recognize the unique attributes and structure of the fire district. So I can't just do that simple cut and paste from another agency's policies because they're not you. So I
Right,
wanna
so
make sure
you-
that if you end up with a bespoke tailored suit that fits you perfectly.
Right, before we approve it. So then,
Or we have to wear a two-way.
so you could use part of option 3 for option 1. Not wholly incorporating everything, but at least looking at like the concepts that could be incorporated into the governance and best practices, legal requirements and governance best practices. And update that, and I mean, 'cause I just view this as our rules of engagement and.
Maybe I've overcomplicated it. Option 3, you would see the current policy with just red line changes.
I don't want that. We've done that.
Option 1 is a brand new document where you could not, that it would be impossible to do a red line because the changes are structural and as Director Bernstein mentioned, I will endeavor to explain how it relates to the current policy, but it's not gonna be just a red line.
Right.
Which I could do anybody, I mean, I'm not really, I mean, the first one, the option 1 strikes me as a little more fun for me,
Right,
but
for
I'm
you.
not doing this for fun, I'm doing this
No,
to
I
help
know.
you do what you
Well,
wanna
I'm
do.
just saying there are good things in the current board policies and procedures.
And I agree, and I would try to keep them, and if I fail, I have
Well, we
4
have to-
people who will
Yeah.
make sure that it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm leaning
Don't-
towards option 1.
The way I look at it is we failed on option
Option
3
3,
already.
yeah, that's
We
that's
tried
how I
that a
look
few
at it.
months ago
For
and
the
completely
10
failed.
years,
Well,
12
whatever
years
happened
I've been
before,
on this
but
board. Yeah,
in my tenure, we've already failed at
Yeah.
it once.
that I agree.
And then number 2 just creates a very bureaucratic process
Yeah,
to try
that
to
would
get a
take
policy that will take forever.
Yeah.
And option 1 says, okay, well,
No, I know, I'm,
keep in mind how we currently operate and what the functions
Yeah.
of the board are, and put a new policy
Wait,
because
wait.
it reflects, what's more common across various agencies.
right, and
Consistent.
what I'm saying is there are some of how we do things in in the current board policy, so you'll take up some of that into consideration as you do option 1.
I
'Cause
would,
I'm in support of option 1, by the way.
It's just-
great, so I now think I have direction, because there's 3 of you who have specifically said you support option 1. You could decide, maybe you wanna have a whole board workshop when I have a draft ready, and you could spend 3 hours working through it and discussing it, and that would be fine by me.
3 days or 3 hours?
I said 3 hours, either one is fine.
3 months.
I really mean it, this is I wanna facilitate your ability to find something that you are pleased with.
I
It's
think
not my time.
for me, I think, I like what you just got to say, Steve, I like, this is Steve, and this is the current policy. And as Jimmy said, there are some things in there that seem to have worked for us as an institution, as a body, but we don't really know the areas as much that really have not worked. And I think that's where, and it's not like, I think it goes beyond just a redlining, but what have not worked, and some things are just not working, for us, as an institution. So how those merge, I don't know, and that would be left up to you.
I also welcome your sending me email saying, hey, I think paragraph 2 on page 27 works particularly well, or doesn't work, is especially poor. I mean, any info you wanna give me, or through the chief, it's all good.
I don't know if you were prepared tonight to do it, but I would be interested in having some sort of a ballpark figure on what this would cost to do.
I'm not prepared to do that tonight, but if you would like to get that information from me before I embark on this, happy to do that.
Well, my guess is if it were, let's say we're $250,000, I think some of the board members would say, whoa, let's rethink this. So it would,
I would think that's off by a factor of 10 at least, at most. I mean, at least.
okay, so you've given a ballpark figure of perhaps $25,000,
That seems much closer to reality than 250,000.
okay, but I had no idea until
Okay,
I asked.
well, glad you asked.
And I've gotten burned before personally on things like that, so
Okay, if it's the board's pleasure to set a budget, I will live within that budget.
I wasn't asking for that, I was just trying to have an idea. And I think at this point, the chief's, sort of administering the budget and can talk about.
We have adequate monies budgeted to accommodate a rewrite in that ballpark.
Hopefully
Plus or minus.
you'll save money years to come
That's right.
through efficiencies and.
And we should consider this an investment, right? I've heard that one before too.
Well, let's just put it this way, I think that this is gonna be good for the board and good for the fire district, and it's gonna be money well spent. We've spent money in other areas before on various consultants that I think were less productive, so I think that we should go with item one or option one.
Okay, I feel like I have the direction I need to move forward. If you wanna make a motion and vote on something, you're welcome to, but not on my account.
We have the consent, Chuck.
I think.
We have
Steve-
consensus on one.
Yeah.
Steve know what to do.
So do you have a timeline, Steve?
How quickly it turns.
Sorry.
When do we get it?
So my commitment was to make this a goal for this year, the fiscal year.
Yes.
So that you have it by
6
July.
months, yeah.
Some of it depends on you. I would wanna bring you back something early enough in the first quarter of 2024, so that if there's need for a course correction,
We can
there's
do
time
it.
to still do that.
Okay,
You're gonna have to rewrite the section that says we have to review this in May every year.
yeah, so then if Steve's gonna bring it back in the first quarter, it will be by March, theoretically.
No,
Or,
the
I'm
first
sorry.
one is in July.
First quarter.
First quarter,
Which institutional
sorry,
system
for
you working with?
Calendar.
I will
he's
bring you,
working on the
I
fiscal
will,
year,
I will
sorry.
bring something
He's
back to you in
in
February
the
or
fiscal
March.
year,
Oh, okay.
right, not the calendar year, sorry, Steve, but it's the first, yeah, I was thinking first quarter of the calendar year.
February or March, does that
Yeah.
work? I mean, I guess I should connect with the chief.
That would be
Yeah,
the
well,
third, that would be the, yeah,
That will work, that's good.
okay.
Sooner as you know,
Because
you say
Chuck's
jump,
right,
I'll jump.
we do.
Everybody needs a Christmas project.
There you go.
Well, Chuck's right, though, we do approve this like in the May timeframe, so,
Well, sneak preview,
yeah.
I don't know, I've never heard of an agency board annually getting out their pencils and revising their policies every year. So, you may not see an annual board-directed process in the news.
Works so well.
Okay, well, so you have your direction, option one.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, on to,
Proposed agenda.
proposed agenda items. Yeah, Robert?
I think, I would like to, based upon our conversation with,
With Elaine?
Elaine, to look at, an item to establish a waterfall priority for expenditure of fiscal year 2023-24 property tax revenue forecast.
You want it to be the property tax revenue, you want it to be the excess funds over the budgeted annual budget.
Which was the forecast,
Right, so you want to establish a waterfall
or
project,
priority, whichever,
prioritize
prioritize.
how to spend the excess, but the projected or excess? Projected excess from the property tax revenues.
There you
Okay,
go.
does that
The
make
only
sense?
reason I made it a little more generic is because it goes to Chuck's point, there could be a scenario where we're underspending the budget.
Mhm.
So we're going to have a projection for how much excess funds we'd have at the end of the year that are either unspent, anticipated unspent budget plus the excess property tax revenues. And so it's gonna actually be a bigger number to work off of. So it's just, I think what you're asking for is correct, which is we should start a process of prioritizing the items we wanna use excess funds for. And there's two components of excess funds.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, to basically, so Gary, excess, projected property taxes, revenues, projected or forecasted.
You could just call it maybe forecast, excess excess funds.
Forecasted excess property, well,
Yeah,
is it because what you're.
well, it's property
referring
tax
to-
and underspent budget.
Right.
And budget, a projection of underspent budget.
Okay,
Virginia, can I?
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
Chuck,
I'm
sorry,
not
I'm just
discussing the issue.
taking notes.
But I'm just, in a sense, that's what we're supposed to be doing as part of the budget process. And we start hearing about the budget, I think it's a little late, but we start hearing about the budget typically in April. I mean, it'd be nice that we could discuss property tax in February or March or something like that. But as a prelude to the budget. But I was just going to encourage you to think about making this part of, there are two budget things here. One is the capital expenditure budget, and the second is the operating budget.
So Chuck, this is just for a proposed agenda item. So we can discuss all of that if we vote to put this on the next agenda.
And discuss it at the next meeting.
If it's gonna go on to the next meeting agenda.
So let me ask, Robert, are you hoping that we would have a motion about what to do at that meeting?
I think we just talked about the motion that, because I don't want to get deluded with looking at capital budgets and all that kind of stuff. This is just
Very
excess, this is just excess revenue.
Property tax.
Property tax revenue that Alan talked about. And and what Gary mentioned, that there may be some excess funds at the end of the year in terms of what to do. That's all I want to know, that's the only thing I wanted to talk about. The other part that you're talking about is a different conversation. And I'd be happy, to make that a part of the thing we put on the agenda too. But I just want to stay focused on that one
Well,
particular.
to me, it's a different part of the discussion that's probably more appropriate in advance of the next budget cycle. As
This
we're
is
preparing
your
for the next
focus.
budget cycle, because we're not going to, it's gonna have relevance. Chuck's point is relevant. I think it has relevancy to the next budget cycle when we get there, but we're not there right now.
Yeah, this is specifically, it sounds like, Robert, if I'm reading this correctly, in response to this item 7 that Elaine was talking about,
Right,
which is,
forecast.
yeah, 2023 tax
Yeah.
revenue forecast. Yeah,
And Gary just added that little extra piece, because there may be some excess funds at the end of the year.
yeah, so, I have down set priorities on how to spend forecasted excess property tax revenues as a next month's agenda item.
That's not, we'll work it out.
Well, did you say how to spend it or just what to do? about
Set
it?
priorities,
Separate.
Okay,
yeah.
but that
That's
doesn't
what I-
mean spending necessarily, right?
No, but it just,
If it comes through, the priority we set, then it's going into
it's
that-
gonna go into those
those
priorities.
priorities.
Okay, that could be a budgeting thing or I mean,
It would
Well,
eventually lead to a budget change, because
Possibly.
a discussion about what to do with excess funds doesn't alter the budget
So we'll go into the next year's budget
cycle.
cycle.
Right.
That's
So
what
we're
you-
gonna be discussing it next month if the board approves putting this on as a proposed agenda item. So is there a motion to put this on the next agenda, which is basically to set priorities on how to spend forecasted excess property tax revenues?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, roll call please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye, so that motion carries. Any other proposed agenda items? Okay, we'll go on to report. Oh, Chuck?
It sort of relates to reports and it sort of relates to this item, and that, do we wanna discuss dispatch? I'm not sitting here saying, I think we have to, in some ways, I think maybe I care about it, I'm not sure anybody else does.
Well, why don't we talk about it at item 13?
Only because the question is, should it be on an agenda item, it doesn't have to be December or January, should we be discussing dispatch as an agenda item, that's what I'm
So
reading.
that discussion is not what's agendized under this topic?
No, but it's for a future.
Right, so if rather than say, should we talk about it, if someone wants to move that it be talked about at a future meeting, that motion could be made.
So I'm asking if we should talk about it at a future meeting.
I think.
Would you like
You
to?
gonna make a motion to that?
Well, is there something to talk about? Is the question.
Probably not yet, but at some point, it's gonna be appropriate at a future meeting. I think, maybe the ad hoc committee will have a better idea of that once we get more information.
Okay, so, we won't- but I do have, there was something we talked about last meeting that was supposed to be agendized, it wasn't a big urgent thing. And in the minutes, and I don't remember what it was now, but I had brought it up. What was the agenda item that we were supposed to discuss that was approved at the last meeting? Do you remember? And we voted on it and, I'm sorry, I knew about, oh, here it is, number 17 in the minutes. A status on the survivor benefit process.
So my understanding, when you made that request, I asked, did you mean you wanted to have a closed session or you just wanted to have a status update? And the answer that I thought I heard was that you just wanted a status update, not a board discussion. And so you've received that status update.
Aha, you've timed me something I don't know, so it's in my email, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
I'm sorry, I was having problems with getting my email, so I will check.
No worries.
Thanks.
That answered my question about that, thank you.
Great, thanks. Reports and requests, committee reports, facilities, Robert.
I think we pretty much talked about everything that was on the agenda today about the needs and requests.
Okay.
And I want to give thanks to John Hitchcock for doing a yeoman's job in his report.
Thank you. HR, we didn't have it.
No, we didn't have.
Then finance.
So finance, we've covered everything that was discussed at finance. The only thing I would comment on that we spent a little additional time on was the investment review of where they're at and how they're making some of the investment decisions. But otherwise, everything else that we talked about in the meeting was moved and approved as resolutions throughout the discussion, so I won't repeat those here.
Okay, thank you. Item 12, liaison reports. Atherton, Gary?
So Atherton, I did list it in the last meeting. I don't really have anything to report. They'll be meeting again tomorrow night.
Okay. East Palo Alto, Robert?
There's, I think everybody knows that there's one of the officers that departed, thank you. And it's, people are pretty shook up behind, especially the police department, and I think the fire department, I went by, they had a kind of joint meeting that morning and kind of got get some consoling with the police department, been getting a lot of comments around that.
Robert, I'm not aware of what you're talking about, could you fill me in, I'm sorry?
I think the chief also sent this in an email.
The chief-
Chief Coyle.
Yeah, Chief Coyle.
Okay, again, I didn't
Yeah,
have
no
access to my
worries.
email, so
This police officer passed away,
who did?
one police officer in East Palo Alto.
I see, okay.
Who is actually fairly close to some of our firefighters, so
Yeah, he lived in
Boulder Creek, yeah.
The city East Palo Alto is going to be going, got a real radical item on the agenda now in terms of doing the property.
The OPA thing.
The OPA, if you know about the OPA issues in East Palo Alto, so.
What?
OPA is the Opportunity Purchase Act, which is.
Should be a local ordinance, right? Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, it is a local ordinance, but it can have over the long-term impact on property tax. Property tax coming out of the city, it's gonna have the probably not a major impact compared to property tax that for the district, but they will have an impact on it if it gets off the ground.
Yeah,
So-
because East Palo Alto's growth is already pretty, we're getting pretty good property taxes from East Palo Alto
Right
already,
now,
yeah.
right, because property taxes are going, that value of property is going up, so the taxes are going to each sale, but that looking to this act really take off, it's really gonna stifle over the next 20 years, that growth.
Do you know when they're gonna vote on that?
They got a second reading coming up, I'm not sure the date, but I think it's gonna be the next one.
So Robert, is the the relationship of that to the fire district is the potential of an action by the city council that would reduce the growth of our property tax revenues coming from East Palmetto over the course of time.
Because it could potentially reduce the value.
Okay, yeah, I just wanna make sure I understood the relevancy to the fire district, so it's a potential longer term revenue impact,
Right. It's not
revenue growth impact.
revenue growth impact.
Yeah.
I think, it's small right now comparing, but it's still.
Yeah, thank you.
May not be able to get that lunch, but for dinner, sure.
Okay, City of Menlo Park.
I only know of two things that are relevant. One is, there's talk, I keep hearing sort of indirectly that the city is dragging its feet on the appointment of an emergency services person. And the other thing is that there's a hearing tomorrow night, I mean, it affects Menlo Park residents where I live, about the East Palo Alto Sanitary District, which covers part of Menlo Park on the west side of the freeway. And the hearing's at LAFCO at 6 o'clock, and basically,
No, it's in the city.
oh, that East Palo Alto City Hall, that's
Yeah.
right. Thank you. But it basically, the city wants to take over the independent district, the sanitary district. And that's what the hearing's about.
Okay, Rob's not here for districts 3 and 4 for San Mateo County, so let's move on to, well, he's not here for the ambulance GPA. So ad hoc committee reports, dispatch services check.
There's nothing to report at this point.
Okay, item 14, reports and requests of directors. Gary, Robert, Chuck. Okay, president's report, I have kind of an interesting report. First of all, I wanted to thank the Station 4 crew for the Halloween haunted firehouse that was on Halloween night. I think probably what time did it start, like 3 hours that it was open? We probably had about 500 people come in and come through, trick-or-treaters, adults and kids. The firefighters did an amazing job, and the community was thrilled to be able to see the fire station, and that's what led to this open house that we are now doing on December 17th. Everyone was so excited, they view it as the neighborhood fire station, and so I would say 90% of the people who came through were like, when are we gonna have the open house so that we can come and see the station? So Mark, thanks for scheduling that. I think it's gonna be fun and people are gonna be very excited about it. Let's see, Maui's fire engine donation was, as the chief said, fantastic. I was there with the chief, and I'm glad we were able to go basically to pay our own way, to actually it was just an honor to be there, right? To see all of this. And as the chief said, there was a need there, and I can't even tell you the public thanks and gratitude that we got, even outside of the ceremony. I talked to, I stayed a little bit longer, I heard from people who lived there how, this one woman realized that we weren't from Canada, and we went into the store and we told her what, why we were there, and then my friend who was with us told her what happened, and she literally broke down and cried because she had lost her job and she had lost friends in this fire. And so that was one particular example, but it was very, very touching. I guess the last part of that, because Mark had already covered a lot of this, was I just wanted to make sure that the Maui County Fire Department knew that this gift really was from all of the about 100,000 residents in the fire district. So they had a Maui County council member there who actually represented or represents this up county area, which is where the Maui fire chief lives, which actually had the worst fire in Hawaiian history.
but kind of was gone, not recognized as such, because it's not as high profile as Lahaina, right, right? But it was actually worse. So she was there, and so she thanked us, and she said something about, the Menlo Park Fire Protection District is an angel. And I basically said, you have 100,000 angels, because that's how many people are in the residents in our fire district. So she was very, very touched by that. We also had the mayor's chief of staff who was there, and just wanted to be there to celebrate this donation. And the mayor couldn't be there because he was actually meeting with the governor to continue talks about their recovery on Maui, which is going to be a pretty long time, actually. They haven't opened up the town of the old town or old Lahaina yet. It's kind of closed off, so you have to take detours to go around it. And I mean, it's still not a great site, but I think people are relatively positive, as positive as you can get. They're very grateful for the help. But the cherry on top was when we were going to the airport yesterday, coming the opposite way on their Highway 30 was Engine 1, our Engine 1. And I don't know why it was where it was going, but when we got to the airport, there was a brush fire. And Maui County Fire Department on their social media listed the equipment that was used to deal with this brush fire. Because the winds were really hard, they were pretty bad there. And that was good compared to the 80-mile-an-hour winds that they had during the fire. And Engine 1 from Waialoku was mentioned in the list of equipment that was used. So, the chief said they were gonna use it this week, and they sure did on yesterday. So that was really good, and I think they were just so grateful. As the chief, as Mark said, they've been short on resources, so they're just incredibly thankful, and the blessing ceremony was very meaningful. So thanks for being there, Mark, and representing the fire district in a great way.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm curious, when we introduce a new engine, we typically take like a month of training and so forth for firefighters on a new piece of equipment. How did they do that in a week?
It is the exact same engine that they already have in service, so it's a twin sister to the engines they already have.
So when we were looking at which one to send them, they had the choice of this Pierce Velocity and what was the other one, the Pierce Arrow?
I don't remember what the 2007 was, but.
Yeah, so they picked this one because this is the one they've trained on before. So they didn't really have to go through training. And actually, I saw them moving it into, after the ceremony, moving it into its spot, right? And they knew exactly what to do. I mean, it was like they'd already been trained on it. But they thank, just so you know, or they thank this board and they thank the fire district for this very generous donation. And it's something I'll never forget. So thank you. And I went to the Cal LAFCO conference in mid-October, and I learned a lot. I mean, it was this was for all of the LAFCOs across California. And just a couple of takeaways that I wanted to just impart. One was that LAFCO, they want, in general, LAFCOs want to be seen as being helpful, like when they do a municipal services review. And sometimes cities, special districts, and county may view LAFCOs as being critical, but they can actually be pretty helpful, and they want to be viewed as being helpful in any way that they can. That was one big takeaway, and they want to be collaborative if they can be. And the other thing that I stressed was the importance of special districts because of some of the essential services that we provide, like fire or water or sewage, that kind of thing. And that the collaboration has to happen between special districts, cities, and counties. And I mentioned in my comment that LAFCO has a role to play in that. So hopefully special districts will be, viewed in a more important way than sometimes they're viewed in right now. But that's pretty much it. That for me, if you have any questions or comments. Okay, then we'll open up to public comment number 2. Okay, we'll close public comment number 2 and we'll adjourn this meeting at 9:09. Thank you.
You guys have one over.
Yeah.
Closes.